The great philosopher and psychologist William James once famously wrote that everybody knows what attention is. Intuitively, that might be true. We all have a sense of what it means to pay more attention to some things than to others. But over decades, psychologists have made astounding progress in understanding different mechanisms of attention and nuances in how different aspects of attention work. Does this make a difference in how we go about our day-to-day lives? If you're a teacher or, say, a parent, why should you care about these nuances of attention? What difference does it make in what you do? Well, to discuss this, or to get a better handle on this, I sat down for a chat with a high school teacher who knows a lot about the way attention works in the classroom. Andrew Watson is not only a high school teacher, but also consults with and runs workshops for parents, teachers, and administrators across the world to help them understand how a better understanding of attention can improve the effectiveness of learning and teaching in everyday life. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Steve.
Thanks for joining us. I'm really eager to talk to you about and get your insights about attention and the important role it plays in the classroom. But before we get into that, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, about what you do and how you got into this, this topic area in the first place.
Sure. So I've been a high school English teacher for a long time. I started in 1988, and I've stopped and started a few times. I moved to Prague when the Berlin Wall fell. I went to graduate school to study some English. I was a dean of faculty for a while, so lots of teaching, but other things as well. And then in 2008, I read on a cereal box that learning happens in the brain, which they don't tell English teachers that, so that was interesting. So I figured if that's true, then maybe I would be a better English teacher if I knew more of the psychology neuroscience angle. So I started learning about that informally for a while, and then I went to a graduate program in this field, mind-brain education, that brings together psychology and neuroscience and teachers in 2011-12. And then since 2012, I've been a full-time consultant, and I go to schools and I talk to teachers and students and parents about cognitive science and what we can do with that in the classroom. As you know, Steve, I've been back in the classroom for the last year. Sort of my world, like everybody's world, has been upended by the last couple of years. So I've been a full-time, a substantial time classroom teacher for a year now again. But I bring both of those sets of experiences to the attention and the developmental work that you're thinking about.
That's fantastic. It sounds like you're feeling an important role in sort of spreading sharing knowledge about how attention works to teachers who are like on the ground working with students whose attention they need to grab and need to know how attention works in the classroom.
I certainly hope I'm doing that.
So I guess one question that I'd love to hear your thoughts on is, why should teachers know about how attention works? What aspects of attention do you think that are particularly important for them to know about? And how can that make a difference in their teaching and how they manage a classroom?
Yeah. So one of the questions you and I have kicked around back and forth a couple of times is what are some common misconceptions about attention? And I think the most helpful reason for teachers to learn about attention is that the most common misconception about attention is actually a really big misconception, which is that it's one thing. There's a thing called attention. So I can say to you, Steve, you really need to pay attention. But the problem is when I say, Steve, you really need to pay attention, I actually just asked you to do several different things. Attention is made up of several different things. So when I say to a student, pay attention, I'm saying do 3 different things, but I didn't tell the student which one they're not doing, and I didn't tell them how to do it. Mm-hmm. So once we start thinking about attention in different subcategories, we get in the habit of saying, oh, well, that's not an attention problem, that's a this problem. That's not an attention problem, it's a that problem. We can start solving the actual problem. So it's much likelier we will successfully align the solution that we use with the problem that the students actually have.
Right. It sounds like there's actually at least two reasons there, two factors there that greater knowledge about attention can help solve. One, if I understand you right, is identifying the particular challenges that any given student might have, and another one is being able to better communicate to the student and perhaps to the parents about what needs to be worked on.
Yep.
And are there particular challenges, attention challenges that teachers are likely to face or that they often face in the classroom?
So if we're going to follow the Posner-Rothbard hypothesis, there are three subsections to attention. So attention consists of how alert you are. So that's the first part, alertness. And then the second part is called orienting. What am I focusing on? And then the third part is called executive attention. What's the mental work that I'm doing? And students can have difficulties with each of those three pieces, and it's important to respond to each one with the correct solution. So because I'm a high school teacher, there are really only two alertness problems. There's too little alertness, the students are asleep, or there's too much alertness, the students are running around with scissors. Those are the problems. So because I'm a high school teacher, mostly I deal with the first problem, which is the students are really tired. They're adolescents. They're supposed to be tired at 8:30. That's normal.
Right.
So a very standard solution to an alertness problem is to get the students to move around. Movement is really good for alertness. So if I've got, it's 8:30 in the morning, my students are all tired, well, I'll give them all markers and have them go right on the board and do something. Movement is good to solve the alertness problem. But orienting is a whole different thing. Orienting means, what am I focusing on right now? Where am I? It's one of the things we often think of as sort of attention in a narrow sense. But am I orienting to, my cat is on the chair next to me purring. So am I orienting to the purring cat, or am I orienting to the conversation that we're having, or am I orienting, I've got sushi waiting for me, so am I orienting to the sushi? Sort of what stimuli are coming into my consciousness right now? So movement is really good to solve an alertness problem. Movement is really bad to solve an orienting problem. If my students are disoriented, if they're focusing on the wrong thing, having them move is going to make the problem worse, not make the problem better. So I need to tailor, because they've got a this problem, I'm going to use a this solution. But there's no such thing, I think, as a list of attention solutions. There are alertness solutions, there are orienting solutions, there are executive attention solutions, but none of those is an attention solution writ broadly.
Right. That's really, really interesting and really important. And you mentioned that your role specifically, or the student population that you specifically work with, are high school students. Have you seen, for example, when you consult with teachers who work with different age students, whether the nature of attention challenges in the classroom is different for younger students versus older students?
It's interesting. I know your focus right now is on development and how these things change over time. One of the things that's happening more and more, perhaps you've had this experience, the longer I do what I do, the more modest I am about what I know.
The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know.
It's true. So one of my mantras these days and this has been true for a few years now, is I say, don't just do this thing, instead think this way. So I say to teachers, think about alertness, think about orienting, think about executive attention, and then talk in your grade groups about what that looks like. But I'm really modest about my ability to say, well, I know that this is the sort of thing that disorients second graders. I don't teach second graders, so I'm not sure. My impression is they are more easily distracted by things like spiders or snowfall or a funny noise or sort of that sort of random funny thing. But I'm not like, my sophomores are like the first snowfall. Everybody needs to go look at the first snowfall. They don't need to look at every snowfall, but they need to look at the first snowfall.
That goes for the teachers too. Teachers have to.
It's true. I was actually, so I work at a boarding school, so I live in the building where I teach, and there's a construction site next door where we're building a new theater. So there was a lengthy period of time in the fall where the construction noise was so distracting that I asked to move to a different classroom because I was constantly disoriented. The beeping of the truck, I couldn't think. I was constantly reorienting to the truck beeping as it backed up. I was surprised how little my students were disoriented by that. For the most part, I'd say at least half of the students said they really wanted to stay in that original classroom because they just liked the classroom better. And the noise didn't really bother them so much. My impression is that younger students would have been more bothered by that, but I could be wrong about that.
That is amazing. I mean, it makes intuitive sense in the sense that you know, the older you get and the more your brain develops, the better you are at filtering out distractions. So
right.
Yeah, my intuition is the same as yours, but I mean that's interesting that the students that you're working with weren't as distracted as you might have expected.
It's something I really learned about myself, that I had sort of thought I was in the middle of the range of distractibility by construction noise, but it turns out I'm at the extreme end of distractibility by construction noise. So now I know.
And I think you've touched on this already, but in your work and your consultation with teachers, have you found that there are, you know, particularly consistent misconceptions about what attention is and its role in the classroom?
So as I said at the beginning, I think the biggest misconception is that it's one thing that you can pay. And once you stop thinking of it that way, that's a huge thing. I also think, depending on the kind of teacher, the idea that inattention is a sign of misbehavior rather than something else, it's the inattention is the problem, not the symptom of something.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I think it's possible to go too far down that path. There is such a thing as misbehavior. And, you know, I did have to talk to my seniors today about if they've got their laptops open, they really shouldn't be looking at video game sites. You know, that's just misbehavior. That's what that is. Mm-hmm. But there are kinds of, you know, if I'm really hungry, my inattention is not misbehavior. That's biology functioning the way it's supposed to function. We are not descended from ancestors who were good at ignoring hunger. Those genes got weeded out of the pool. Mm-hmm. We descended from ancestors who really focused on being hungry and solved that problem. So, you know, the solution to a hungry student is for the student to eat. That's the solution. It's not the student's fault that they're not orienting. They're orienting to their hunger.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that's a really neat point, and it's such an important point as well. I can easily see, even as a parent, you know, who studies attention, it's often so easy to confuse attention issues with misbehavior issues. So I think that's such an important point.
Well, and I would think, especially, I don't know how old your children are, but I especially think of young children, like the meltdown looks like misbehavior. The meltdown isn't misbehavior. The meltdown is I need food. The meltdown is I need a nap. And once the biological need gets taken care of, you know, the behavior is fine. That was the sign. My biology is out of whack.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I know that, thank you so much for your time. I'm just going to keep you on the line for just a little bit longer, because I'm also curious if there was a particular question or particular knowledge that researchers could pursue or learn about attention, explore about attention that would be of the most benefit to the teachers you work with and to yourself in the classroom. What questions would you like to see attention researchers tackling?
So that question, the moment I started thinking about it, this sort of cascade of thoughts has poured out of me. So it's sort of hard to limit. I'll try and, you know, turn off the fire hose, but I'm interested. Here is the question I get most often. In a question, is the Pomodoro method true? is there really something magical about 20 minutes?
And can you specify what the Pomodoro method?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Work for 20 minutes, stop and do something else, work for another 20 minutes, stop and do something else, work for 20 minutes, because human beings can only pay attention to something for 20 minutes. Is that number true? And my answer to that historically has been anytime there's a specific number, you can be confident it's entirely false, because it's going to depend on the age of the student. It's going to depend on what they're working on. It's going to depend on time of day. It's going to depend on what they were doing beforehand. It's going to depend on how interested they are in the subject. I would be really interested in a developmental look at how long, if you say to a second grader, in optimal conditions, if you say to a second grader, work on this quietly by yourself, how long does that last? And what about fifth graders? What about eighth graders? What about 11th graders? And then I think I'd be interested, are there non-obvious signs that mind wandering has kicked in? Like, how do I, like, if the student is doing this, here I've got my Macbeth. If the student is doing this, how do I know that they're paying attention to Macbeth? Because they could be doing this and thinking about the movie that they were watching yesterday.
Sure.
Or sort of picturing, you know, Denzel Washington was just in a Macbeth adaptation. So maybe they're thinking about their favorite, or maybe they're sort of listening. They can auditorily imagine Denzel saying the lines. Maybe that's what they're doing. So it's that sort of thing. How, in optimal conditions, how long can they last? And what are the signs that it's breaking?
That's interesting. That, I mean, and that gets at a distinction between covert and overt attention. Often you can tell where someone is paying attention because we just assume that where their eyes are going is where they're paying attention, or there's some outward sign that they're overtly paying attention. But we're perfectly capable of making ourselves look like we're paying attention, but having our attention on something else, and that's covert attention.
I'm glad you brought that up. And back to misconceptions, one of the things that I talk about with teachers is it really is a thing. There are some students who, in order to listen to you and hear what you're saying, they need to look away from you. They have to look at the wall to do that well. And it's not common. You probably know the percentage better than I do. But that really exists. And sort of being open to the idea that attention doesn't look the same for everybody. Because teachers work with large populations, we have to know what the average is, but we also have to know the range around the average and when to be able to accommodate the range.
That's really interesting. I mean, if you've got a classroom of tens of students, you can't take the time to address each individual student's attention needs. That makes total sense.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I found it a particularly insightful and valuable conversation for myself. And I've been studying attention for years, but in the laboratory.
Right.
To have these kinds of conversations, I just love the opportunity it gives us to make better connections with the kind of attention research we do in the lab, and really its implications and how it really truly works in important real life scenarios.
And I think what's so exciting about this discipline is potentially it brings together you with your kind of expertise and me with my kind of expertise. Both of us will do our jobs better. Your students will be better at thinking about attention if they've got a teacher's perspective, and teachers will be better if we have a researcher's perspective, because it's really complicated. And both of those ways of thinking about what's happening will each be better at our work if we have this other lens on that.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to more. Sorry?
Yeah.
I'm definitely looking forward to more conversations like this.
Yeah, I agree.